If you're retired, you're like, yeah, I don't really need a permanent job, but I'm bored. I'm now a consultant. The mantra of the consultant is, if you're not part of the solution, there's good money to be made in prolonging the problem.
And that's a great tagline. Oh, man. That's fantastic.
This episode of the Fabricator Podcast is brought to you by Nuts, Bolts, and Thingamajigs. Tee off for the trades and support the next generation of manufacturing. Join us on Monday, May 22nd at Firethorn Country Club in Charlotte, North Carolina for NBT's Golf for Manufacturing South. All proceeds will go towards supporting summer manufacturing camps and scholarships. Reserve your spot today by visiting nutsandboltsfoundation.org.
Hello, welcome to this episode of the Fabricator Podcast. I'm Dan Davis with the Fabricator. I am joined by Amanda Carlson Hicks.
Correct.
Yes. Do you use the dash in public?
I haven't changed my name legally yet.
Oh,
so
that's a
what
process.
are you now?
It's a process,
Yeah.
and I'm a little intimidated to get started with it.
I don't
So
blame women for not wanting to have to do that.
yeah,
Just to
So
take
just
some
for
dude's
those that
name.
don't know, Amanda has just decided to change her name.
Yeah,
She didn't get married or anything.
I feel like if you're
No,
gonna make the effort
single.
to change, yeah, right,
single.
yeah,
Put a ring on it.
yeah. Okay, first
little one.
challenge: dabbing.
I can't do it with the
Seriously.
microphone
Here you
in
go.
my way.
Yeah. If you're listening to this, Amanda is wearing tiny hands.
He's not wearing them.
These are my hands.
Oh, those are her real
Gareth,
hands,
and
yes.
I'm offended.
Sorry.
Seriously.
I'm offended.
Don't
Yeah.
minimize her hands. Get it?
They're already
All right.
minimized.
So Amanda Carlson used to write for the Welder magazine, and
Correct.
she's now helping us out with copy editing. So you probably don't see her byline as much.
You're
Also-
welcome.
Not as many angry readers, so I thank you for that as well. And Gareth Slager is joining us, our digital editor. Today's episode will have our colleague Tim Heston chatting with Chris Keel. I'm along for the ride in this. This was recorded at our FMA annual meeting, and I think there's some good content available. Both Tim and Chris have a nice head of hair, and somehow or another it led to a conversation about perms. And I think Amanda has a nice perm story for us.
Well, so I have very, very straight hair naturally, and my mom was a hairdresser, and so we would get perms probably 2 or 3 times a year. And right before I went to college, I thought it'd be great to get a perm, just to
Oh, this is before
just
college.
change it up a little bit, like
New person going
have
into
curly
yeah.
hair, right? I think she left the solution on too long because it burnt my hair off, like my hairline burnt off, and when it grew back, it was all like spiky. And I had to intentionally dry it a certain direction so that it wouldn't stick straight up. It was
That
that
have
was
been-
the last perm I ever
How
got.
did that first year of college go? Made a lot of good
I-
friends.
You're like,
Did you hang out with the punkers?
they called me Spike because of my hair.
'cause
This is true
I
story.
can't with the hands.
It's good to see that
You're like,
bullying.
First my hands, now my hair.
It's just it was a tough year.
Yeah.
It was a tough year.
Well, you've bounced back. You've had obviously many setbacks you've dealt with since then, so that's good.
Yeah.
I was kind of surprised, perms, certain guys have had experience with perms. You mentioned your brother.
My brother had a perm in
Yeah.
high school. My dad had a perm. He looked like what was the Mr. Brady's
Mr.
name?
Brady.
What was his Mike
what was
Brady
his actor's
from the Brady
name?
Bunch.
Robert.
Mike Brady,
It's 2 R's. Robert, not Redford, obviously.
Robert Redford, Robert Reed.
Robert
There you
Reed,
go.
yes. Not the former Houston Rocket either.
Wow.
When I was in high school back in the 30s, it was a Catholic high school, and the guys had, as most Southern males go through at some certain times, had mullets kind of extending beyond the collar, which they were not allowed to according to the high school handbook, student handbook. So to combat this, they had perms in the back. So it was like regular hair up front and business in the front and curly times in the back. I don't know.
Early times.
That's a very disturbing look. So, and then until you see how actual perm is done, it's way too much commitment to a hair.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah, and I don't know. Just to think like guys would go through that. That's something
So,
else.
what's your most embarrassing hair style that you ever?
I had so this is once again college. I instead of putting my my hair in the hands of A, an experienced stylist, or B, some like World War II veteran behind a barber's chair, I decided to go to Supercuts and get a flat top.
Oh wow.
Yeah, like went through a whole spiked hair like thing for one summer.
So we have to get pictures of these, right?
No, that's
Yeah.
the issue with this is like smartphones didn't exist back then.
But
so
there has to be some.
no, man.
Visual evidence
I barely
of
have
this.
any photographic evidence of myself and my own family after I turned 6. Like I was a cute kid, and then like middle school happened, and I just came out, like teeth all gapped and just big old bulbous face, zits. It was just not good.
At least you didn't have little hands.
Okay, next
Not the
challenge.
normal size.
Typing on a
Actually-
keyboard, Amanda. There you go. It's
Actually,
like the cat.
your hands are not that much smaller than mine.
So I had a rat tail when I was in grade school. My parents let me do that because
Did it come with a skateboard, or did you grow it yourself?
I did not have the skateboard.
Really?
I was a kid with a rat tail without a skateboard, which is the
And
worst
what
kind
was
of rat tail.
What was the inspiration for this?
I was playing soccer in the summer, and
It gave
all the
you
cool
extra
kids
powers?
were like trying to grow their hair, and I tried it, and my parents were like, "This is what you want to do."
It had to be New Kids. New Kids all had.
Yeah, this was
rat
very
tails.
early '90s.
Wait,
Yeah,
Yeah,
Kids-
that's when they came.
New
Yeah.
Kids is on the block.
New
or
Kids
like,
on the Block.
Oh, I thought it was like
And
New Kids in the
KOTV.
neighborhood.
yeah, the new kids in the neighborhood. Yeah, yes.
That
So-
had to be the inspiration, right?
They were immigrants from the land of Ratalia.
Ratalia. Wow.
Yeah. So when you would go out, would you make sure to take it and like drape it over your shoulder?
So there's a class picture. Like, when you start the school year, they have like start of the school year pictures and the end of the school year pictures. So that start of the school year picture, I tried to like put it over my the photographer wanted me to put it over the shoulder, and it exists. That picture somewhere.
wow.
I think
and
my-
you went to a Catholic school when this was happening?
No, I was a public school kid
I was
until
about
high
to
school.
say that's not
Yeah.
going to fly in a Catholic school,
No.
is it?
No.
You probably would have been sent away to like, I don't know, where do they send bad rat-tailed kids?
To the outer limits of the city somewhere, Hononegah.
to be stoned and prayed over, and then you're brought back into the group.
Yeah. So you had a burnt perm, you had a
I had a
flat
burnt
top,
perm, yeah.
and I had
Burnt
a
Perm.
rat
That's
tail.
a good album title.
Did you have a Brandon
Just shaved head.
shaved head?
Is that really the
That's
first
the
time
safest-
Brandon has talked?
He's got a mic
I have a
on.
microphone now.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
Brandon, by the way.
Yeah,
He's the tech guy.
yeah. But
So, yeah.
well,
So
let's
what did we
transition
learn?
into this episode somehow.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the guys who have the really great hair and really good conversation.
Last challenge: attacked by bees. There we go.
Everything's normal.
Yeah.
Don't
It's fine.
worry.
It's fine.
Enjoy.
This episode of the Fabricator Podcast is brought to you by FMA Communications. Join us for the Stamping in an EV World Conference on June 13th in Novi, Michigan. This one-day conference will guide stampers, fabricators, and OEMs through the shift to electric vehicles. Business leaders from top automakers will share insights on the challenges and opportunities presented by this exciting new era. Sign up today at fmamfg.org. And now back to the episode.
Hello. Welcome to this episode of the Fabricator Podcast. We're recording this live at the FMA annual meeting. And today we're going to chat with Chris Keel. He's with Armada Intelligence and also is the author of Fabrinomics. If you're a member of FMA, you're familiar with this piece of economic intelligence that's sent out on a monthly basis. And good stuff. He knows our industry probably more than a lot of other people do. And we're hoping to chat and learn something about what's going on with the economy and how it might affect our constituency in the metal fabricating community. And from your standpoint, you talk to a lot of people. Similar concerns? What kind of concerns are you hearing from not only maybe the metal fab folks. But maybe
Yeah, the
others.
concerns are pretty universal across industries, but so are the feelings of optimism. I mean, one of the things that struck me all year long for the last, 100 talks that I've done is people kind of separating what they hear about the economy from their own experience. That what they're seeing in their companies is growth, and they're seeing book of business, they're seeing encouraging trends in a lot of areas, kind of contradicts what they hear from the mainstream, and there's an awful lot of, I think, future concern that comes out of the analytical community, because we'll look at things like the potential for higher interest rates and persistent inflation and the worker shortage and decide that that's going to have a dramatic impact on the economy, which it does to a degree, except that we forget that businesses react in different ways. They're saying, well, if I have a worker shortage, I need to look more at robotics. I need to figure out how to use automation. I need to do better training. If there's an inflation threat, well, I need to start controlling my cost. Where can I find better suppliers? How can I react? So there's almost this assumption by the analysts that everybody goes static. And of course they don't. They react and they try to figure out how to keep growing their business. So I'm cognizant of the problems that are still out there, but I also see a lot of solution-oriented behavior.
Yeah, a lot of people at this conference are, obviously it's somewhat upbeat, cautious optimism. They're catching their breath from last year. A lot of folks are going, "Hey, finally it's softening a little bit. It's not too bad. We're still optimistic for the rest of the year, but we're a little worried." And a lot of folks are worried about interest rates.
Right.
And I'm wondering, all right, what's the future of that? Where do you see it headed?
Yeah, when you understand that the mantra of the central bank is that they raise interest rates until they break something. And once they know they've broken it, then they worry about lowering rates to fix what it was they broke. So part of their challenge right now is to figure out, did we break enough of the economy that we can stop it? Traditionally, they have looked at employment rates, and they've said, when the unemployment rate goes up, we have done what we set out to do. Except that the jobless rate now is very strange, and it's not reacting traditionally, and a lot of it you see in manufacturing. I talked to a lot of these companies that said, in previous years, we would have laid people off.
Yeah.
We have seen enough of a decline in business that our pattern used to be that we'd lay people off, wait for the recovery, hire them back. We're afraid to lay people off. It took us so long to find these people that we know that if we lose them now, we'll never get them back. And so they hang on to them. I was talking to a guy that says, I got a 6-figure income employee that's sweeping my floors because I don't want to lose him. And I know I'll need him next year, and I don't want him to go to work for somebody else or change careers.
Yeah, right, especially if he has that specialized skill.
Right.
Does demographics play a role here too, with kind of the boomers, slowly retaring out of the workforce?
Oh, absolutely. And they're not slowly retiring; they're retiring en masse.
And it's been more exacerbated since pandemic.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, you had people that were offered buyouts and early retirement, and they took it. By 2030, every single boomer will have reached retirement age, all 74 million of them, out of a population of 330 million people. That's a big chunk. And many of them, boomers are notorious for not having lives, so they keep working into their 60s and 70s. But you get into your 80s, and now it's a whole different deal. They are retiring. And maybe they're still working, but they've changed careers. It's like, hey, I got early retirement, I can go do this. And that's where the gig economy comes in. And it's a lot more than Lyft, Uber, and DoorDash anymore. I mean, there's lots of things people can do in that quasi world. And if you're retired, you're like, I don't really need a permanent job, but I'm bored. And
I don't have to stand all day.
Yeah, I'm now a consultant.
Of course. Well, you're speaking in the third person, Chris. I'm not sure what's going on.
Well, the mantra of the consultant is, if you're not part of the solution, there's good money to be made in prolonging the problem.
Oh man, that's a great tagline. Oh man, that's fantastic.
So What is the metric that these maybe the Federal Reserve, what are they looking at if it's not unemployment that'll give them an idea?
They're trying to cobble together a whole series of indicators: industrial production, purchasing managers index. They look at capacity utilization. They're trying to see any clue that the interest rate environment has slowed things down. And another challenge, and this is really manifesting this year, is that we still have $3.5 trillion in excess savings in the consumer sector. And I've got a chart that I show, and I mean, it is like this, and then jumps, never seen anything like it since the 1950s. This was a holdover from 2020. We dumped money in the economy, as you do during a recession, waiting for the consumer to spend their way out of the recession. Except it never occurred to anyone that if you close everything, the consumers can't spend any money.
Right.
So we went from a savings rate of 6% to one of 38% in a year. And that money's still there, and we don't know what to do with it. So the Fed's tactics are blunt. I mean, they're just trying to dry up money so there's none to spend. And the consumer's like, nice try.
Yeah.
I still have all my savings.
That's right.
It's like I'm gonna complain about inflation, but if you think I'm giving up my caramel macchiato latte, you got another thing coming, buddy.
Yeah, it's only $7. I mean, come on. You know? So, well,
I think you can rent them now.
that's right. Macchiato as a service. Well, you know, another big concern too here is obviously government politics and the debt ceiling and bonds and the whole financial structure of the entire world. So how about that?
Well, we're going through what we have become used to, which is political gamesmanship, and you've got politicians that are well aware of the fact that if they don't extend the debt ceiling, that it's going to be an economic catastrophe, but they've got a base that's not that cognizant of this. And so they tell them one thing and then do another. And we've done it dozens of times now. You know, I'm not going to pass this. I'm not. Yeah, I am. And it's like with them last minute. And they'll generally, as they have in the past, choose like a holiday weekend so that everybody is distracted and doesn't realize that their politician did what they always do. And not that I'm cynical or anything.
Well, they had it scheduled for January during the lame duck prior to the new Congress, right? Yeah.
So the real issue with the whole debt is that obviously it's a problem. We spend too much. We don't take in enough money. The solution to the problem is spend less, raise money. Neither one of them is popular for a politician. So we end up having to borrow. The question is, if you want to control all that spending, why didn't you do it when you were setting the budget and when you appropriated, instead of saying, okay, we're going to do this, and then deciding whether you're going to actually honor what you said you were going to do? Part of if it makes us feel any better, China's debt to GDP is 280%. Japan's 260%. The average in Europe is 170%. We're at 130%. We are the most fiscally responsible country in the world.
And that hasn't,
which is frightening.
Yeah, but that hadn't increased too much, because I think it's been 120, high 120s.
It's come up a little bit. You know, we have the world's largest GDP. It's $24 trillion, so it's a chunk of change. But the issue for us is different than with a lot of countries. The problem is not that we can't continue to borrow if we want to. It's debt service.
Right.
We're paying $500 billion a year in debt service. The entire military budget's $700 billion.
Yeah.
So
right. So you have that mostly non-discretionary spending. Well, actually, it is.
yeah.
Right?
I mean, it's the big four. It's Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, the military. If there's good news down the road, it's simply that eventually boomers die and Social Security and Medicare go down. So if you want to be really patriotic, just start wandering off in the woods and expire and
That's right.
and
That's right.
quit drawing off the government funds.
Well, so in between the government, some people wanting to raise the retirement age and the actual retrenchment of the a longevity of Americans. I think we might be all patriots, whether we want to or
Yeah,
not.
well, the original establishment of 65 as a retirement age was based on the fact that we were supposed to die at
Right.
66.
Right.
I mean,
right.
they weren't going to be paying for us very long. If you use the same system that they used in the 30s to establish retirement age now would be 86.
There you
Right,
go.
right.
So if you love America, you go out and eat that 8-piece box for lunch.
Exactly.
Right. So maybe
Raise
you
that
know,
cholesterol.
that's right. That's right.
We need a pro cholesterol party.
Well, I think I'm your man.
That's right. So just kind of you cover railroads a lot. You cover supply chain. What's kind of and another? We're kind of all recovering from this. Just in time to just in case, and now inventory build is up on the raw stock side, and just kind of where is that headed in 2023 after the chaos of 2022?
Transportation logistics sector has begun to come back to normal. At the beginning of last year, we had a huge capacity issue when it came to trucking. There were 14 loads for every truck, and it drove prices astronomically high. We used to pick that up in the FFJSER, which, by the way, worst acronym ever.
It's a fujitsu.
The
Forming and
FIV
fabricating
the
job
FIV
shop consumption report.
Thank you. We need to hire somebody from the Defense Department to give us a cool amount. Anyway,
NASA
but
really does the best.
the logistics was getting very expensive. But what happened last year is we got 65,000 new trucking companies in 1 year because there's very few industries easier to get into. I mean, if you wake up tomorrow and say, I'm tired of working for FMA, I want to be a trucker. What do I need? A truck and a CDL, and you, sir, are a trucker. And so you have an awful lot of, and you can see it on the roads, Mama, you betcha's real good trucking.
Right.
I mean, it's new players, and they'll come out as fast as they came in, but right now it's 4 loads per truck, not 12 or 14. And price of trucking has come down, price of rail has come down, shipping, maritime has come down, not to where it was prior to the pandemic, but you had $23,000, $24,000 containers and are now 12. They used to be 6.
Right.
How do you, and just to reinforce, if you want to be a trucker, you also will be eating poorly and supporting this country.
It's the cholesterol thing.
Exactly. Believe me. So manufacturing is in such a weird position in this economy in the sense that there's some other sectors seeing massive layoffs. People will argue that technically it is a recession because you've had some, I don't know if it's negative, but in maybe their sectors, they feel that pain. And manufacturing is kind of humming along. Is that kind of a sign of what we are to expect in terms of its role in the overall economy?
Yeah, I think it's true. The U.S. never experiences a 100% boom, and they never experience a 100% recession because there's always a sector that is doing better or worse than another. I mean, the recession that we went through in 2020 really hammered services. So if you were in hospitality, if you were in food service, if you were in travel, it was one of the worst years you've ever been through. Manufacturing grew because people had money, and that money was being dumped into the economy, and it's like, okay, you can't go out to eat, you can't go to events, you can't travel, you can't be within 80 feet of your own relatives. What are you going to do? I'm going to buy something. During that period, RVs, you couldn't buy an RV for love nor money because everybody now, they've flooded the market because people are like, this is carrying my house. I have a house. Why did I buy another one then? And mostly it's a why is going, great, something else to clean. But your manufacturer is in a position to kind of react to consumer demands relatively quickly. And we always forget that as a manufacturing nation, we make high value, expensive stuff. We don't make consumer goods.
Right.
We're airplanes and road building equipment and railroad engines and all that stuff.
Yeah, and yesterday during an economic presentation, or Omar's presentation actually, the lobbyist, he gave a great chart of here's the trade balance from through 2001 to 2022, like incredible amounts imbalance with China now, even more than before the tariffs.
Right.
And he said, this is the power of the U.S. consumer. My goodness. And even if with all this reshoring, it's like, it's still just the balance is way off.
Well, and it always really will be, because you have consumers trained to demand inexpensive goods. And I mean, how many years have people just kind of knee-jerk complain, oh, Walmart's destroyed the small town. Yeah, well, where do you shop?
Right.
Walmart. It's like, well, why? Because I want to buy 700 tube socks for $1. And it's
Right.
like, well, okay, well, you're not going to get that unless it's coming from China
Right.
or some other Asian competitor. I think the real shift, however, is that if you look down the road, China now wants to really emphasize its own consumer. It does not want to be as export dependent as it's been, and that is going to have an effect on how much we import from China, because if you're going to have your own consumer, well, gosh, they need money. And so the average wage rate in China is escalating really fast. And so all of a sudden it's like, wow, this is not as cheap as it used to be. No, because we're now paying the Chinese worker a lot more money.
And doesn't help they're short of people.
Yep, and they have a labor shortage too. I mean, the one-child policy is catching up. They have an elderly population, not as bad as Japan, but there's lots of these not imminent trends, but India, for example, is now accelerating as people expected it to for decades.
Right.
And partly it's because India has always been able to produce whatever China can produce. They couldn't get it out of the country.
Right, the
Their
infrastructure.
transportation was so bad. But now people are looking at it going, yes, I realize it's still bad, but China's no joy either. So I'm going to go ahead and work with you, and then we'll all pray that the bridge doesn't fall down and the ship doesn't sink in the port, which has happened 5 times this year already.
Oh, that's fun. We should cover that.
That is the supply chain problem.
Yeah, exactly.
That is a
It's like-
supply chain
it's like,
problem.
so where's my product? It's at the bottom of the bay. Does
Yeah,
it
yeah.
float? Oh no, it doesn't float.
Yeah.
Well, then we're out of luck.
I did want to give a plug though. We plugged this in our preview, the ASIS, which is a
Yes.
really nice acronym right
Yes,
there.
it is.
The,
There you
the
go.
Armada
Just rub
Strategic
it in.
Intelligence System. I'm just saying. But just kind of bring us through the different sectors you talked about in your latest report. and
Yeah,
you
what
see.
we started, and this is something we began about 4 or 5 years ago, and our statistical guru is a retired lieutenant colonel who used to be in the artillery. And he pointed out that in his previous incarnation, accuracy was really, really important. So he uses the same multivariant system that he used when he was in the military. And we've gotten 96, 97% accuracy month to month, quarter to quarter. So we look at industrial production without considering utilities and mining. So when you get the industrial production numbers, they're always a little weird because it throws manufacturing in with oil and gas and utilities. And so we strip those two out and just look at the manufacturing part. And the subsectors, automotive, aerospace, electronics, machinery, primary metals, fab metals. And so we get this running month-to-month assessment of where those are. The overall industrial production kind of direction was big peak in 21, 2022, as we thought, comes down off of that. We're sort of in the middle now of that slump, but then it turns about the middle of the summer and starts going back up again. And you look at the numbers compared to the past, it's right back to where we were 2015, 2016, 2017. So it's not, wow, this is the best. No, it's kind of back to that normal that we got post-2008 recession. So you look at companies and say it won't be grinding horrible recession, but it's also not going to be dancing in the streets either. It's like if you did okay last decade, you'll do okay now. But you're probably going to have to kind of go back to the behaviors prior to 2020 and 2021, because those are both just weird years that will never be compared to anything.
Right. And, I remember talking to shop owners 5 or 6 years ago after the Great Recession. So that was their perception. And they said, 3 or 4% growth year over year. And he's like, it's kind of nice. It's nothing to write home about. and there's complications of investment. They needed capital to actually invest, and so that large growth number in the last few years has been great. So they could invest, and we're seeing that now.
Yeah, and that's going to be the big challenge, because if they are able to deal with the worker shortage, it's going to be through technology, which makes them a lot more capital intensive, and it also allows for less adjustment. When you're human dependent, you can do the layoff and rehire, layoff and rehire. Once you've invested in the robots and the technology, the payments are still due. And the bank is like, hello, where's my money? And it's a little more pressure because you don't have the ability to ride out the slumps as you were in the past. And robotics is now getting into sectors it never got into before. I mean, it's in the service sector. You start looking at some of the countries in the world. Japan now uses robots in assisted living and senior living facilities, and the people like them better than people.
I think I would sleep a lot better having a robot tend to my older kin.
It's kind of like, no matter how you cut it, you're doing embarrassing things when you get to that age. And you've got some individual who's trying not to judge you, but they are.
The validity of this, I have no idea, but I saw this AI-enabled human resources professional. It was fantastic. It was, there was an employee complaint, and he's like, "I'm sorry to hear that." Oh my gosh, that's so free. It's like, I can't do that, Dave. I don't know.
It went in 1 week of news, like the Microsoft AI that they were just kind of unleashed on the internet. It went from like feeling sorry for itself and questioning its existence to becoming belligerent and like outright like just ugly. I went from like, oh, they're gonna be like me, sit on a couch and just want to get enjoy a nice weekend doing nothing. But no, apparently not.
Yeah.
You're like everybody else.
The angry like internet algorithm is like caught up to it.
Exactly.
Well, what scares me though is that everything it says somebody wrote on the internet, and I'm like, and I'm like, oh man, this is a terrifying mirror of
It's
humanity.
gone down to the dark web.
It's when the AI machine starts to demand that you equip it with hands because it needs a beer.
That's what I'm hoping for.
It's kind of like, come on now.
Is that what they mean? What's the term? The singularity? Is that what it is?
But I mean, getting back to the CapEx, so I mean, I remember like in 2007 and prior, $300,000 investment in a machine for this industry, especially small shops, large CO2 laser, let's say $500,000 was is huge, And now at this conference, we're talking about buying machines that are 1.5 million.
Oh yeah,
and that's fine.
One of the things that is kind of a surprise advantage with higher interest rates, the loans that people are getting are more expensive because the rates are higher. However, I speak to a lot of bankers, and they're saying, look, for the last 10 years, we have been so risk averse because there's no margin, none at all. So we had to only loan to people that were their mantra was, you have to absolutely prove beyond a shadow of a doubt you do not need the money.
Right.
Then we'll loan it to you. But now we have some rate margin to work with, and so we're becoming a lot more interested, particularly in manufacturers. Because if you're coming to them and saying, hey, I want to open up a coffee shop, oh God, go away.
Yeah.
But if you come and say, I want to buy a $1.5 million machine, ooh, collateral. You betcha.
Right.
We'd be more than happy to loan to you, because if you do go belly up, you loser, we've got a $1.5 million machine to sell.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
So no, we've had a generation grow up with these low interest rates. They don't know the days of 14%. Interest rate on a mortgage.
The youngins, they just...
I'm in that group now. Yesterday I was pretending to be 35. Now I'm going to pretend like I'm 68. But is that what the ultimate goal is, to get back to like that near zero type of rate and make it easy?
There's no desire to go back to that. That was, even as it was being done in the post-2008, and we have to remember how weird the 2008 recession was. I mean, we obviously know 2020 was odd, but the 2008 recession was an entirely financial sector-driven, inflation-ridden, it was just a mess. I mean, that was back when the housing market was on fire, and people could get loans if they could fog a mirror, and that nobody wants to go back to. So, but nobody wants to go back to the 80s with Paul Volcker either. And again, the youngins don't remember, Volcker cigar chomp between his teeth. I'm raising rates to 20%. I'm going to kill inflation. You're all going to die. That's your fault for making me the Fed chair. And it's like, okay, Paul.
That sounds like the Microsoft chat or AI. Yeah.
He's an economist, ladies and gentlemen.
So we don't have, another Volcker in the wings, but even back in 2008, I mean, there were dissenters that did not want to see rates down that far. The leading dissenter was from the Kansas City Fed, my city's Fed, Tom Honig, who basically said low rates are a bad idea. It's going to kill savings. I mean, nobody's going to want to save when there's no incentive to save. It's also going to make the stock market weird. And part of the reason the hawks have wanted the rates back up is the stock market behavior. People would borrow money at nothing, go out and play the market, make a lot of money, pay the loan back. And the hawks would always say, yeah, you can do that till it corrects.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you owe us a lot of money and you don't have it to pay. And that's part of what's been happening this year.
Oh my gosh! Wow. Well, we visited operation yesterday, Precision Tube, which they have multi-million-dollar investment on the floor. 5 years old. The guy came from the rental car industry.
Mm-hmm.
And but he was just had a great business mind, had a great business plan, and got the financing, got the machinery, and now he has millions of dollars of equipment on the floor, producing millions of dollars of revenue a year, just at 5 years old.
Right.
And employing people under 40, all of them. They're kids.
Yeah.
And not much experience, but that's kind of shows kind of where manufacturing is today, where it's like it's just an open playing field, and there's so much opportunity because there's the technology's making it so efficient that it's worth it despite the high interest rates.
And one of the things manufacturing has noticed is that there has been so much change with automotive and robotics that lots and lots of experience isn't as important as it used to be. I mean, when you're dealing with technologies that are brand new, well, your 30-year employees don't understand it either. They didn't grow up with it. The new generation has. And you find, generally speaking now with hiring, companies are saying, look, I can train anything. I can't train attitude.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to have the right mindset. And I mean, even with my own company, we just hired a research assistant who doesn't know how to do research. We're training her because her attitude was boundless enthusiasm. And it's like, fine, we can train you to do what we want you to do. We cannot train you to be enthusiastic about doing it.
Right.
Is there anything on the horizon that gives you pause? Maybe
You know,
even a
it's-
geopolitical sense?
I think the experience of two big black swan events right on top of each other has made us aware of the fact that these things happen and you're not prepared. I mean, the black swan concept was created by economists to explain why we're wrong so often. And they just gave us an excuse. My favorite definition of an economist is someone who explains tomorrow why the predictions they made yesterday didn't come true today. And so first we have the COVID black swan, then we have the Ukraine invasion. The black swan that we're worried most about now is China, Taiwan. And if people are looking for a reason for the U.S. to be so engaged in Ukraine, that's it. We're basically sending a message to China. Like, if we're willing to spend this amount of money on a country we never cared about before, what do you think we're going to do if you mess with Taiwan? And Japan now militarizing, and nobody is blinking an eye. I mean, if that had happened 20 years ago, people would have thrown a fit. And now Japan is like, hi.
Right.
We're still a country with a martial tradition.
Yeah.
Right.
So is the leader of China, I think Xi, is he comparable to Putin in the sense that he's kind of the one-man power source that can affect that type of happening?
Yeah, he consolidated his power dramatically last year. That was kind of the last opportunity for other factions, and we saw what happened. I mean, his predecessor was literally bundled off the stage and put under house arrest, and his chief rival was kicked out of the Politburo. The interesting thing from the standpoint of Xi versus Putin is a typical megalomaniac, power mad, doesn't care about anything other than his own ego. Xi is still fairly economically driven. He wants China to be the dominant country, and he was unlikely to do something that would cause serious economic distress. Even his own military has issued a report saying if we get into a confrontation with the U.S. that provokes the kind of sanctions Russia's dealing with, please be aware that 60% of our food comes from outside China. If that's cut off, we will have food riots. And the report ended and said every Chinese government for 2,600 years that has fallen over food.
Right, and the oldest there, remember Mao's, what's it called, Reign of Terror? Right?
Yeah, and it's so there's a certain amount of delicacy involved, but China wants to throw its weight around, and it's going to, and it's causing all kinds of changes within the Asian perimeter, some of which is in China's interest, a lot of it is not. The Philippines is suddenly cozying up to us again.
That's funny.
Yeah, Vietnam is basically saying, you do realize we hate the Chinese, and we have always hated the Chinese, and if you would help us, we'll take over the world. I've come to the conclusion that if you want a country to like you, you have to go to war with them first. So Vietnam likes us, Japan likes us, Germany likes us, the French don't. And
I know what's going on.
I know. It's like we've been on their side too often. Personally,
We have Louisiana. We don't need the French.
yeah, exactly. My solution to all of our problems is simply to invade Canada. We would get all the oil and gas. We would get better hockey, and we could give them Detroit back.
We get Tim Hortons, so
Yeah, exactly.
Give me some Timmy.
I saw Tim Hortons in Scotland. So
Oh,
Did you?
wow.
Yeah.
That's
So I wanted to ask you this, kind of unrelated. So I think it was this week, the New Yorker magazine had an article entitled like "The Death of the English Major,"
Right.
and I think your background's fair to the humanities. I mean,
Yeah, kind of.
yeah, but knowledge, you studied
Right,
Russia,
right.
everything. I see this as the real, not the story itself, but kind of a commentary on where the lack of people going into humanities in a lot of these four-year schools as a reflection of society recognizing, hey, I want to major in something I can get paid for, recognition of STEM careers, or recognition maybe they don't need four-year colleges. That's a good thing, but is it necessarily, do you see this as kind of like a long-term shift, or is it just one of the kind of the part of the pendulum? And I realize higher education had a big part in this as well.
Right.
Big role in this as well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the conversation is almost an attitude towards work. It's kind of the U.S. attitude versus the European attitude. We're basically, we live to work. We define ourselves by our jobs. The Europeans say, no, we work to live. And and first of all, their education is for the elite. It's not for the masses. The percentage of people with degrees in Europe is very low compared to us. Their attitude is, if you want to go to school, that's for your personal development. It's like you're doing it so you can enjoy life and be a full citizen. We're still pretending that everyone that goes to college is preparing for a career, which most of them are, but then we let them major in stuff that's not related to a career. I mean, I taught for 15 years, and I don't know how many these heartfelt conversations with somebody saying, yeah, I know that you really like this, but at some point you're going to have this thing called a mortgage,
Right.
and you're going to have to find a way to pay for it. By all means, keep this interest in whatever, because that will give your life meaning, but you better figure out a way to make a living. And in my own case, I mean, I started out as a Soviet specialist back in the day and was going to get a job with the agency and study the evil empire and be a spook, and I was all set and learned Russian and lived in Leningrad, and then the SOBs go out of business in the middle of my PhD. And it's like, really, you last for 70 years and you die now?
the nerve. Jeez.
I sent a really nasty letter to Gorbachev saying, you couldn't wait a year.
Then he came out with that Pepsi or Pizza Hut commercial.
Yeah, so I ended up having a metamorphosis into a slightly more normal economist. But
It's just, of course, what's interesting. I mean, this is totally kind of off topic, but it's I see these majors and actually jobs that are coming around that I'm thinking may not be around. Like, 'cause it just kind of there seems to be, because we're in this transition. That's a political conversation anyway on its own. But some kind of officer, content mediation officers and all this kind of stuff. Like, what do you do exactly?
But even in manufacturing, though,
but in manufacturing, we actually make a thing. That's what's great.
Oh yeah, but I'm talking like cobot technicians. It's gonna change in terms of the amount of automation being used with these processes. How do they fit in? Do you need an automation expert? Do you need a software developer on staff?
Well, it's interesting. I wrote about this in the magazine. Is software's writing itself now,
Right.
and so it's just so AI-driven software and low-code software. You've got these folks that are just adapting, like Power BI, or not Power BI, or Microsoft Power Apps and something like it, Alpha and a few others. And they are creating unique solutions in the shop. And these guys didn't major in software, but they're just go-getters and really eat up the information. And there's enough baseline of code there that they can work off it.
Absolutely.
So somebody else, so
The big change as far as education and careers and all the like is my generation. You could expect to work for 1 or 2 or 3 companies your entire career. You really weren't going to have to change what you knew very much. I was telling students 20 years ago that you better be prepared to work for 6 or 7. Now you better be prepared to work for 20 different companies in the course of your career, and you're going to reinvent yourself every 5 years. And so whatever skill set you have now, it won't be relevant in 5 years. And you're going to have to adapt to what's going on around you. And bottom line is, people don't much like adapting. They want to do what they've been trained to do, and they want to do it until they decide not to do it anymore. But those days are over, and it's going to really benefit the person who's committed to lifetime education and flexibility. But the guy that's like, are you kidding me? I just want to show up, do my job, and go home.
Right.
Like, well, yeah.
Preach,
Yeah,
yes.
case in point, we were not doing this 5 years ago.
Yeah, in case in point, we'll just make the announcement now. Tim will be launching a TikTok channel this summer. So be ready for that, folks.
Exactly. And you've not lived until you've seen the 3 of us dance.
I am so lame. I only know about TikTok because they feed it over to Twitter. Like, I don't even have enough technical sense to set. I'm like, I don't know. I don't need.
I just keep waiting for the merger of Facebook, Twitter, and you Twitface. So.
I see. Years ago, I used to watch this thing called Short Attention Span Theater. You remember that?
Yes.
And they were 2-minute clips or whatever. And I'm like, wow, you had that's too long. You got to be kidding me.
Yeah, and then Vine came out. They had 7 seconds.
That's right.
If it was more than 7 seons, you kind of lost everyone.
That's
I want to go back to the days of Max Headroom.
So.
One question to wrap it up. Your outlook on manufacturing,
Pretty
North America?
positive. I think that some of the trends that we've seen develop since 2020, reshoring is not going to go away. It is going to be controlled to a degree by labor availability, transportation, et cetera, but it's a real thing. We had $1 trillion worth of it last year. I think that the demand for high-level goods is continuing to increase. I mean, the more that we become dependent on technology, robots, AI, it reinforces manufacturing because that's what manufacturing does. The demand for things was made pretty obvious in 2020. I mean, people still want what manufacturers produce, whether it's at the business level or the consumer level. And you're now seeing countries, including the U.S., take that seriously with infrastructure. I mean, we didn't talk about what's going on with alternative energy and all that stuff. There's the amount of money that's been pledged to do that is rivaling what was pledged to build the interstate highway system in the 50s. And we don't know exactly where it's going to go. We don't know exactly how it's going to be used, but there's a tremendous incentive to develop something, whether it's wind or solar or geothermal and realistically, it'll be all of those things, depending on where it makes sense. And at the same time, you're still going to be dependent on fossil fuels through the end of this century. So there's lots of opportunity to be involved in cutting edge stuff. And we've certainly seen how fast that happens. That people say, oh, that'll never, oh, it already happened.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, so it's, we are being trained as consumers slowly but surely to be a lot more self-sufficient. I mean, for God's sakes, back in the 70s and 80s, I made a living as a young man as a gas jockey. You know, I filled your car and checked your oil and gave you Flintstones jelly glasses. You know, those days are over.
You can still go to New Jersey if you want to revive.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I have one question.
Go ahead.
What can watermelons teach us about the economy?
Yes, what can watermelons teach you about the economy? Interestingly enough, the reference here, for those of you who are not aware, I gave a speech to the National Watermelon Promotions Board. We've been doing a project for them, trying to figure out what impact they have on watermelon consumption. But here's the thing you learn. Going to these conferences, these guys are as passionate about their business as the manufacturers I meet here. I mean, they are extremely proud of what they grow. I mean, when you're in the watermelon business, what people don't realize, they have to turn every single watermelon every day. They have to physically turn it, because otherwise the bottom gets yellow and it flattens out.
Yeah.
Right.
And these guys work incredible hours, and you've never seen a more beaming look on somebody's face when the crop comes in the way it's supposed to. And I think that that's what always strikes me about manufacturers. They are very proud of what they do. They make something, they are passionate about it. It is a definer of their life. And whether it's watermelon producers, and this week I spoke to the Vinegar Institute, and vinegar producers are just as proud.
That's right.
Well, you kind of made that statement. You know, you talk to a lot of people, and they all have kind of the same sense and concern. So there's probably more that we have in common than we don't.
Yeah, manufacturers are probably not as worried about the demand for balsamic vinegar as others, but you never know.
Well, you know, you spend a lifetime supporting this country, eating food high in cholesterol. Eventually, you need some kind of creative salad dressing.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it comes full circle. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Please go to where you get your podcasts. Refer to a friend while you're there. Rate, review. And if you have a question, let us know. And the email is podcast@thefabricator.com. Yeah, there you go, man. I'm getting good. So once again, thanks for tuning in, and have a good one. Bye.
The Fabricator Podcast is a production of Fabricators and Manufacturers Association, located in Elgin, Illinois. The show is hosted by Dan Davis and the staff of FMA Communications. The podcast is produced by Gareth Slager and recorded and edited with the help of Brandon Geyer. Sales support provided by Andy Flando. Additional production support by Elizabeth Gavin, Dana Weicker, Mary Diamond, Mike Owens, and me, Sarah Spring. Thank you for listening.